This month's podcast episodes are proudly sponsored by my own book, Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Have you ever had a great idea for a product? Or does creating a product to sell appeal to you? Where do you begin? How do you come up with a product idea? And if you have an idea, how do you know if it's even viable? In Bring Your Product Idea to Life, I take you through the process of creating your product step by step. From developing your product idea to finding suppliers and launching your product, we cover it all. The book includes advice on how to price your product, where to sell it, and how to find out if anyone will actually buy it. Designed to help you make real progress, Bring Your Product Idea to Life is both practical and motivational. Every chapter includes clear action steps so you know exactly what to do and when. This isn't just a book for reading, this is a book for doing. Bring Your Product Idea to Life is available via Amazon, on my website, and linked in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hi, today on the podcast, I'm speaking to Scott Deas. Scott created and sells a unique whisky water pourer called Ooshky. It's basically a water drop shaped jug that combines the function of a bulb dropper and a pipette, which lets you add water to your whisky by adding either a splash or a drop. Scott sells these direct to consumers through his website and Amazon. He also does wholesale, and at the time of recording, he has Ooshky stocked in about 20 shops. However, we recorded this a few months before you're listening to it now, so I really hope that that number of shops has gone up in that time because Scott has such an amazing, unique product. And he's going to talk to us all about it. He explains how he came up with the idea for Ooshky, how he created his prototypes, how they're manufactured now, and he also talks a lot about the challenges of marketing a product that's so unique that people don't know it exists and possibly don't even know that they need it. So that's all really interesting. Oh, and he does all of this while working a full-time job as well. And he speaks a lot about the challenges of being a startup while having a job, how he manages his time and tasks, how he prioritizes, what he does, and importantly, what he's stopped doing in order to make time for both. So as you can tell, we covered a lot in a relatively short space of time. This is a great episode and I can't wait to introduce you to Scott. So hi Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Can we please start with an introduction to yourself, your business and what you sell?
Okay, yeah. I'm Scott, Scott Deas. I've got a business called Ooshky, which is basically a small ceramic jug for adding water to whiskey. That's the main product that I sell. It's the name comes from the Scottish Gaelic word Ooshky, which is for water, as the product is for adding water to whiskey.
Amazing, thank you. And what inspired you to create your Ooshky?
Yeah, so it's funny. It's a long journey, but yeah, basically, I'd kind of got fed up. I like to drink whiskey, and when you add water to whiskey, it really opens up the flavors and it can enhance it. So yeah, I'd kind of got sick of using a big old milk jug to add water to my whiskey, and a lot of people just use the tap or they'll use like a teaspoon and things like that. But I just wanted a small jug really for myself. That's kind of how it started. And then I happened to through my work, so my main sort of job is as an engineer, and through that I discovered a website which could 3D print things in ceramic. And so that just kind of got my brain kind of whirring, and I wanted to create this jug. So I decided I wanted to be shaped like a water drop. And that was really the goal. And the idea was to create this and give it to a couple of people as gifts. So I gave one to my dad and one to my younger brother. And they both loved it. And then my younger brother said to me, I really love the fact that when you cover the hole, you can control how much water comes out. Which was brilliant because it wasn't actually something I had thought of myself. It just kind of was a bit of a happy accident. So it was really nice. And I think once I realized that, and sort of showed it to a few more people, I kind of realized that, maybe this was something that I could try. So yeah, it was quite a few years between that and actually deciding to make it into a business. But that's kind of where it came from.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when you said at the beginning it was a long journey, I mean, I think most journeys are, aren't they, really? I think very few people I speak to get their product developed quickly. It often does take some time. And it's so interesting as well that you created it for yourself, first of all, without thinking of it as something you could sell.
Yeah. It was just, like I say, because I'd found a site where I could have something just made as a one-off in ceramic, I was just like, oh, what can I make? And that was kind of what came to mind. And then it just kind of grew from there.
Did you say they 3D print in ceramic? Well, I've never heard of that.
That's amazing. I know. And it's not very common, and the company actually stopped doing it. I think it was costing them too much. But as far as I know, it was a ceramic powder, which they then fused together to create the clay model. And then it went through the usual process of being wired and then glazed. So the final one. So the first few prototypes were ceramic. But it was great because it meant that I knew that it was something that would work. And then it was just a case of finding someone who could make it. Yeah,
that makes sense. And so that was your designs, weren't they, that they were printed from?
Yeah, so I created the designs in 3D, just using 3D CAD. I know some ceramicists do it that way, but not always. A lot of people just create the first one by hand. But that's just what I was familiar with. So that was the tools that I had, and that's kind of how I did it.
Well, that's really good though. And what about now? So how do they get made nowadays?
Yeah, so they're all made from it's a ceramic process called slip casting. So I have molds. They pour in liquid clay, and then as that dries, that creates the wall thickness, and then they pour it out. And it's quite a common process, but although it's using a mold to get the shape, it's all finished by hand. So there's a lot of trimming needs to be done. You have to cut off the sort of excess clay, and then they're glazed, and then there's a little logo on the bottom as well. So it kind of goes through the firing process a few times, and they are all handled with care.
And how easy or difficult was it to find someone that could do that for you? Because I'll be honest, I know you say that the process is fairly common. I haven't heard of that, and I thought you were going to say you had someone who sat there and made them by hand. Although I do know there's a lot of crafts involved in them. How did you go about finding someone that could produce these for you?
So that was probably the hardest part. I thought it would be easy because I was used to working with suppliers for my other job. I kind of knew how to approach people and get quotes and things like that. The problem was finding someone to make it, and I was really keen to have it made in Scotland because it's to do with whiskey. I thought that would be great if this could be made in Scotland, but a lot of the sort of pottery houses and things, a lot of it's just either their own stuff or it's like hand thrown things. So then I eventually found a company down in England, down in Stoke-on-Trent, which is like the ceramics capital of the world, they say. I worked with them for a while, but it didn't work out. We couldn't quite get the shape right with them. So we decided, I think they were finding that the shape is quite challenging. So it is quite probably difficult to achieve. So then just because I was just wanting to start out and I was just wanting to get the product out there and see how it did, I used the contact that I had already out in the Far East, and they made one up and sent me a sample, and it was perfect. I couldn't believe the quality. And it's funny because when you talk about Far East, a lot of people just assume that it's like mass produced and really cheap, but it wasn't the case. The price was pretty similar to the one in the UK because it is a slow handmade process. So that's where it started. But since then, I'd kind of continued to look for suppliers, and I've found somebody now in Stoke-on-Trent again, they're making it now. So they are now made in the UK, which is nice to say. I think a lot of a lot of stockists and stuff, they do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, and well done for persevering with that as well. It sounds like it's quite challenging to get it made in the UK.
And then I think to add on top of that, this was during the pandemic as well, so it just added more delays on it as well in terms of getting samples. And when you're dealing with sort of Chinese companies, or I think they were in Taiwan, there's always a time delay in getting messages back and forth, so it just lengthens the process. Whereas when you're dealing with people in the UK, it's so much easier to just pick up the phone and get moving. So.
And you're right, all of these things do add time. And as you mentioned earlier, you're doing this around your day job as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I'm a mechanical engineer, and I do that 4 days a week. I used to do that full time as a permanent company, but now I work for myself. But actually, the reason I went to 4 days a week was to allow myself that day to work on this, and that's been really good. But I was kind of thinking about it before when I was preparing for this, that I remembered, although I work for myself now, so I've got the flexibility to shape that. Even when it was full time, it's actually something that everybody can request as a flexible working policy with the government. And if you've been working somewhere for 6 months or more, you have the right to request reduced hours, or just changing your working shape. So that's what I did. I think I originally compressed my hours and dropped a few. So rather than doing a 38-hour week, I was doing 35, I think it was, but over 4 days. So yeah, that kind of gave me that extra space just to do that. And now I'm working for myself. I do contract work. It means that I can kind of fit in bits and bobs here and there, but I do try and be quite boundaried and do most of the work on the Monday. That's my day off. My day off. I say day off. My day on Ooshky. And I just find that kind of helps. Just stop it from overrunning into other aspects of my life, as small businesses can do.
I guess it's really hard to manage your time. How are you how are you using your time now, and how has that changed? Because I think that I'm sure it's evolved, as business owners, we all get better at how we manage and use our time, especially when we have limited time. What's your advice around that?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning with that one. I think the main thing I've sort of learned to do over the past couple of years is to really try and focus on what's important, because I do have quite a creative mind, and I'll get ideas for things, and before I know it, I'm looking into the next avenue the next thing I want to do, and kind of losing sight of the here and now. So I think what I try and do is I've got a to-do list, and I try and just really be quite just quite focused on how I spend my time. I try and allocate a certain amount of time each week to doing PR. I run the website myself and designed that myself. So I kind of have to keep an eye on that, and obviously processing orders as well. But yeah, I kind of just have to be quite disciplined. But it's not my strong point, but I seem to be getting better.
It's like you say, it's always a process. I think all of us could, when we look back in a year, but what we might think now we're doing quite well in a certain area, but when we look back in a year's time, we still had a way to go. What about, is there anything that you don't do anymore? I'm just being really curious. Is there anything where you've kind of come to realization, actually, it's not that important, I could stop doing that?
Actually, I did start off I spent a lot of time on Instagram, trying to build a following on there. And I still use it from time to time. I still try and, if I create a new video and things, I will try and put it up there. Or I'll maybe do a few stories if I'm at a trade show and things like that. But I think what I realized was that a lot of my sales weren't coming from Instagram. And it's one of those tricky things, whereas I know that brand awareness, building that brand and getting people to know about a product, it's not always about sales, because, it can take time to introduce it, especially something like this where nobody's even heard of it or seen it before. It's quite foreign to some people. But yeah, I think what I realized was because I did have limited time, I was better to spend that time focusing on my website and my CEO for that. And just making sure that when people search for whiskey gifts or whiskey water jug, that I kind of come up near the top. And yeah, I've got there's a wee box on my checkout where people can say how they heard of me. And then also you get like your analytics of the website, and I can see that most of my traffic is either directly to the website or from Google or other search engines. So it just became clear that, okay, maybe it's nice to have a nice Instagram, and I do have plans to do that. I have plans to kind of spruce it up a bit and things, but at this point it wasn't that important to me. So yeah, that was something I'd probably let go of.
I think that's really smart because, as you say, you've only got so much. All of us have only got so much time, and I think you can end up spreading yourself too thin and not doing well at anything. I had the same when I had my products business, where I was selling on so many different marketplaces, but actually there were only two that were generating what I would call like a decent number of sales. And really, and obviously I did this over time, but really what I should have done so much sooner was go, do you know what? I'm just going to focus on these two, and everywhere else either can sit dormant or I close them or whatever. But I was almost putting more effort into the things that weren't working than the things that were working, which looking back now is just crazy.
Yeah. I think sometimes I could probably do with taking that step back and just kind of evaluating. And I think that's something I did start doing then. At the start of this year, I decided that this year I was going to focus more on my wholesale, because I had it in maybe 10 shops last year, and I realized that that was always going to be part of my strategy for the business was to get into shops, because especially places where there's lots of tourist activity and things, because I knew that just exposure to the product would really help. So at the start of the year, I went to a trade show, and by doing that, I kind of doubled the number of shops that I'm in, and I, in the process of updating the website so that there's a wholesale section, so it's much clearer for people to contact me and kind of find out how to get involved and become a stockist.
That makes total sense, because I think yours is such a great gift product, and I can definitely see it in gift shops and that kind of thing, particularly in Scotland, I guess, or anywhere, and also places that sell whiskey.
Yeah, exactly.
It just makes so much sense. I don't know, like a distillery or something, to have them in the gift shop.
Yeah. So there's a few distilleries of it. There's a few sort of tourist places and lots of gift shops and a few whiskey shops. Yeah, so it does seem to cover quite a few markets. Yeah,
that all sounds really good. Coming back to what you were saying a moment ago about sort of needing to look back and maybe not always knowing what the best thing to focus on, I guess, it's when you're starting a products business, if it's the first time you're doing it, I guess it is such a steep learning curve, isn't it? Because there's so much you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it either, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was quite naive to the whole thing, to be honest. I think I thought, that as long as it was out there and people could buy it, then it would sell itself. And I quickly realized that wasn't the case, and I needed to kind of push it, and also had to spend some money on doing that, which I hadn't really, or hadn't realized how much that would cost, actually. Not just like, I don't do too much advertising. There's one magazine that I do advertising now and again, because it does seem to make a difference. But just even to like get access to sort of good quality PR links and things like that, PR services and things. So but it's definitely, I'm realizing how important that side of things is, just to get the brand awareness out, and it is working. It's like I am seeing things sort of starting to change as well.
That's really good. And I totally agree with what you say about that. You're the second person this week who said to me, oh, I thought, I had a product and it was there and people would come and buy it. And I think that yeah, it's really easy to underestimate the amount of work you have to go in, like getting a product ready to sell and having like something physical you can sell, I think is actually just a really small part of it. There's so much involved, isn't there, in actually talking about your product and getting people to find your product.
Yeah, I think that's the big challenge is getting people to find it because especially if they don't know that it exists or like doesn't like, it's not because it wasn't, although I was releasing a product in an industry that existed and there are other things out there for doing what this does, it's still different enough that people wouldn't know to look for it. So then it's how do you get it to them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that actually, because you're obviously it's an original idea. Nobody else, as far as I know, is selling something similar.
Yeah.
So as you say, it's not something people are widely looking for.
Yeah.
How are you getting it in front of people? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been trying lots of different things to see what kind of works. So yeah, in the early days, I did a couple of markets and I did some whiskey festivals and things. And yeah, kind of like what you were saying earlier, things that have dropped. Those are some of the things I don't do anymore, mainly because I realized that although I did get a good number of sales from it and it does give exposure, I just found it took too much of my time and it was quite exhausting. So then I kind of, I tried things like Facebook advertising. I find Google ads are really successful. I think because they're related to search terms, and let's be honest, the first thing I do when I'm looking for something or even looking for ideas is I go to Google and I'll type in a few words. So I find that that's the best place. I think having things on social media definitely helps. I think, yeah, just having a presence so that if people do sort of stumble across it, then you can find it. But yeah, I find the social media adverts actually do seem to reach a lot of people. And then I've noticed there's definitely been an increase in word of mouth. So people who've bought it mainly for gifts, and then they've then either bought more or they've told somebody else about it and that kind of thing. So yeah, a bit of that kind of organic sort of word of mouth sales as well is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that really working because I think yours is the type of product that when someone finds it, because it is so unique, you want to tell people.
Yeah.
Like it's something you want to share. You must have that feeling where you buy something and you've never seen something like it before and you tell everyone because it's so different. And I think that's something your product's definitely got going for it. I wonder if in terms of marketing as well, for what it's worth, if sort of thinking about what products people are looking for that aren't as good as yours and kind of almost targeting people looking for those, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what I've tried to do with Google. But I think I kind of forgot to say one of the main things I've been doing the past year or so is focusing on trying to get into magazines and doing PR, particularly the Christmas gift guides. So I had quite a bit of success with that. And I feel just because it's a time of year where people are just looking for gifts, is such sort of broad kind of coverage as well that it does, a lot of people do see it, and I think that's really helped. So yeah, I kind of did have listened to the podcast you had with PR Dispatch, and so yeah, that's kind of the stuff I've been doing.
That's really good because yeah, I think you're right. Yours is a sort of product that's so unique, and everyone's looking for unique gifts, aren't they? Because we've all got that person in our life that's really hard to buy for, and I think your product is great for that person that has got everything because they won't have one of these produced, not yet anyway.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because it's funny because I kind of always tell people it's because there's a huge market of female whiskey drinkers which a lot of people discount, and I think it's great for that, but the thing about shops and stuff is they love that this product is something that you can get for a guy who you don't know what to get really, because it's like, if you know that they like whiskey and that they like to take water in their whiskey, and it kind of falls into that nicely. So yeah, it is for everyone, but it does do particularly well for that kind of gift for him.
And until we spoke, I don't know much about whiskey. I don't drink whiskey, so I didn't even know you added water to whiskey until we were introduced, Scott. So that's really interesting too.
Yeah, it's definitely a personal preference, and it'll depend on the whiskey as well. Some whiskies, particularly the stronger ones, they do better with a little bit. But yeah, if you go to any sort of whiskey tasting, they'll always have a wee bit of water, and they'll kind of encourage you to try it neat and then try it with a bit of water, and just see the change, and then again just experiment and find the level that you like.
Hopefully in time when they're doing that, they're using an Ooshky to add the water.
Yeah, exactly. That would be lovely.
That'd be the goal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for sharing your story and all of the advice you've had. I've got one final question before we let you go, if that's okay, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
Yeah. So I think as a small business, and I don't know what the term for it is, but if you're just a one person business like myself, I think it's really important to trust your gut and your instincts, because there's been so many times where I've kind of maybe delayed making a decision, or I've kind of sought advice from people, and I think if I just trusted myself a bit more in the beginning, I maybe would have done things a bit quicker, or I wouldn't have wasted time doing some things, or just kind of, I created the product. I know who it's for, and I know how I wanted it to look, and how I want the website and things to look. So I think just having that belief in myself at the beginning would have, been really good. Obviously it is good to get outside opinions and advice and stuff like that, but I think just trusting yourself a bit more.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago, because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features, like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.